Welcome, heroes. In this video, I have a big surprise for you and me. It's inside this box. This was sent from Renegade, so a big shout out to Renegade and a thank you for inviting me on to the Renegade Con. It's gonna be a blast to open this up and paint up one of the figures from the new story arc. So let's open it up and see what we got. Here we go. I am so excited. I do think I know what's in here, but I've never actually seen it. So it's gonna be a nice surprise. Got some packaging and more packaging. Whoa! It's the blue. Holy cow, he is huge. Wow, look how big that thing is. Oh, that's so cool. Oh, this is gonna be fun to paint. It's massive. As always, we start with a good prime. I'm using gray for this. Thought going with the gray prime as the main coat and then dry brushing the white allows for the speed paints I'm going to be using to stand out a little bit better. You can use black and work your way up to, which will make your shadows and everything darker, but I wanted this to be a little bit lighter with the final result. So that's why we used our gray and white instead of black, gray, white, which I do that more frequently. So next I like to pick out all my colors. There's so many choices. One of the things that's kind of fun that I picked up is this color cube. It has hundreds of color schemes that you find in natural places, nature and stuff, and they are all kind of written out and they just give a really good contrast or complement each other really well. So with this blimp, Mr. Zed, Nesbitt, he is from the forest, so I picked one that has some green in it and also that had some silver platinum because those were kind of the main colors you're looking for, and then just some accents to complement it. So once you've kind of decided on your colors, I like to try to pick them all out before I start painting. Inevitably, as you paint, you kind of end up with picking out some different colors along the way. So thinking, you know, the dark green on top, light green for the wings, and these can, I don't know, they're like rudders on the front to probably control where it goes. And then some silver, and we'll probably paint him some of the greens, and then we need some rope color as well, which is kind of like a brownish color, a little silver here, and we'll do some pool coloring on the boosters with some color. So shake up your paints real good, I always do. And that way they work out better. Number 4 generally is what I use to get started. It usually works really well for most areas, especially if you have a nice fine tip, even some of those harder detail areas. And then when you get to some really small parts, I usually cut it down. And here, just painting up these areas are really big. So this first piece, you know, I didn't love the way that little square turned out, triangle, because it's like learning, you know, how it's gonna accept the paint on this first part, which is part of painting. It's experimenting, and you get better as you go every single time you paint. Even on one specific model, you might get better just in that instance. So here with the speed paints, you know, they act similar to washes, so they kind of fall into all the recesses. You want to put on thick, but you want to go a little bit faster, which I figured out because it left a few little lines I didn't love, but once you get going, it turns out really well. And so it fills in all these little areas, and I started painting up all the green areas a lot faster, so I didn't have any streak lines of any sort. And it looks great. I really like this color. I think it worked well. Yeah, it's still drying up, but it looks good. I like the texture on this figure. Looks really good. The one thing I've noticed is all of these figures, Age of Annihilation, everything, they're really good quality. I like the details, and there's more details in some of the miniatures than even the artwork sometimes, kind of comparing and looking like, oh wow, there's a few more details I've noticed on some of the figures. There we are. All that green done, so we can move on to our next green, the lighter green, to hit up those other fabric pieces. So we'll get the rudders here, and here's just making sure that you kind of guide that. See there, I'm just kind of added a little extra in the shadowy areas. So you kind of have to guide your speed paints to make them look the way you want them to look. Now we're going to use some brownish decay. This is for all of the ropes. There's a whole bunch of rope on this thing, so just work your way around. One thing on the speed paints, which is nice, which I did have to go do a little touch up because I got the green on the rope. But if I get the brownish on the green from the rope, it's not as noticeable, just because the lighter colors going on to darker colors, you can kind of cover up a little bit better. Once they dry, they just kind of blend in, especially if it's like a big crack on between the two different sections. But so keep going on all these ropes. You know, I've been painting on and off for a good 5 years. But now that the Heroscape has come out with miniatures you can paint, I've been painting like every day, every week, a lot more. Here we got out our steel color, it's silver, and we'll hit all of the basket on the outside with this. And I also had painted the underbelly all of the same steel color. And you notice that it's already painted there. Might have missed according to the part, but yeah, it happens. But it's pretty simple, just filling that in, getting in all the cracks, and working your way around. Sometimes it's hard to get where you need to get on a miniature, so my tip for that is to rotate the miniature around more often than you adjust your hand with your brush, because it's a lot easier to keep control when you have that same pulling motion. You're not pushing the bristles anywhere or have a weird angle like that. So it's a lot better to try to rotate the miniature, which, yeah, I flipped this guy upside down a lot and from a lot of different angles just to get in every spot that I can. But painting is definitely a whole hobby on its own. It's an artwork. Now we go to the bronze to hit all the little details on here. I ended up picking bronze over doing like gold because I figured, you know, he's from the forest. We want a more earthy tone instead of being a gold. So I like that better for this. But yeah, like I was saying, you know, painting figures and everything, it's quite the art. It can be very enjoyable if you like just to kind of slow things down and just enjoy the process. It can be very enjoyable. You know, some people are looking at it in ways of monetary, which in the long run, possibly if you don't go too crazy, you could probably save money by painting your own miniatures. But if you really get into it, you end up start buying more brushes, more supplies, more paints, and I don't know if you really save any money, especially when you add in the time. You know, with speed paints, it can be a lot quicker, you know, to get a pretty good finish, but it still takes a good chunk of time, you know. So I think it's a preference. If you want to paint it and you want to get into that, then get into it and have a great time doing it. And one of the things that I love about painting miniatures is you get a greater connection with every figure you paint. So there we go. Now just hitting these little spots here with that same bronze. It's kind of like, I don't know, little pegs or bolts that hold on the ropes. But yeah, miniature painting it can be a lot of fun, and you get this connection with each figure, and so it makes it more exciting to get the new figures, because you're like, how am I going to paint this one up? What's my little touch I'm going to do? So now we take the polished silver and we're going to hit all those little bits and pieces on the wings and around the top that really look like, I feel like they should be metal. So that's why we're doing polished silver. It'll be metal. But So yeah, you get this connection with your miniatures, so it becomes a lot more exciting to play with them and to use them. And it's been a lot of fun because we've had people at the monthly tournaments that have been painting their own stuff, and a lot of people get their own little spin and ideas and get their own unique style of doing things. So you get to see other people's paint jobs, which is a lot of fun, and it really just livens up the world. I think it is a fun thing to be able to have these different paint jobs going on. So then when you meet up with people and you're playing against other people, you see how they painted their figures and kind of changes it slightly. And it's really easy to tell if you have a mirror matchup and you painted yours differently than everybody else, and you don't have that problem of distinguishing who's who. Now getting little silver bits here in the propeller. And one thing with the speed paints is that they are designed to kind of spread and fill in all the cracks and everything, and then leave less on the high ridged areas. So doing these big flat surfaces with the metal, you'll notice that it leaves some of those white spots shining through. So a lot of the metal, I ended up going back and doing a second coat just to thicken it up. So probably could just use regular paint for that and did a metal paint instead of using the speed paint, but it was right there ready to go, so I used the speed paint, just did 2 coats, which a lot of times you end up doing a couple coats with a lot of different paints. Now we're just getting all the metal pieces on these rudders, so I'm going to call them the rudders. And just trying to be real careful not to paint over, because you don't want to have to go back and do touch up. But it's okay to go back and do touch up. I quite frequently do go back and do some touch up because it happens, and that's one of the things I like to contrast between painting and life is we make mistakes. It happens. But there's always a way to usually fix things, You can always go back and make things better. You can apologize. You can fix the anything you do, and that's the same thing in the painting. If you make a mistake on the painting, you can either touch it up, and if it goes really bad, you can always remove the paint and start completely over. Yeah, it takes time if you're going to do something like that, but with all the failures that you make in painting, each one is a learning opportunity. So you're able to get better at painting. So makes it a lot of fun to be able to continue to learn. That for me, that's a fun part of painting and doing this, is that you learn. And I think learning's fun, It sometimes can be hard, but in the end, it makes it worth it. All right, now we're going to go with that silver and just hit all these little rivets all around it, which if you want, you could just completely paint over the whole thing instead of trying to paint around the rivets, because when you put the paint on top of the rivets with, these darker colors, it covers it all up anyways, which you can see I did that on the little rockets there, but that was after I'd done it to everywhere else and realized, hey, I don't need to be so intricate trying to cover these up. So yeah, it looks just as good when you cover those up. So that is definitely a tip on this one, I would say. And there's a lot of different ways you can kind of go about painting, like the process, going from top to bottom or smallest detailed areas to the bigger areas. I like doing the biggest areas and working my way down and into the detail, and typically using kind of the darker colors first and then work to my lighter colors. But you can do it the other way too, go from lighter to darker. It's just your kind of preference, but for some reason I always leave the hardest part last. Now we're just painting up the back of the rocket here with our silver. Just making that whole thing silver, and it looks pretty good. And then here in the back as well, painting up. I'm just trying to paint the very edge. If you look closely, there's kind of on the back of that rocket, there's kind of an inner ring, and that's where we're gonna paint it up white to make them have a kind of a rocket glow effect. So I grabbed this purple tone because I didn't feel like there's enough contrast in between the two silvers, that big silver area versus those smaller junctions of silver supports, whatever that is, in between the balloon and the bottom. So my color scheme wanted some purple, so I thought, hey, this is the way I can get some purple in. It's kind of a light effect and might give me enough contrast to look a little different, you know? Try something new, which I try to do that every time I paint any figure. I try to do at least one new thing. Sometimes it's a couple, but at least one. Now we're just gonna take the silver and get these wings that I hadn't done. Kind of forgot about it as I was painting along. Yep, just be real careful not to paint over anything because I'll save you time. But this is a really cool figure. I'm really excited to play him. I actually, at the time of this, I don't know what he does. You know, my assumption is he's gonna carry around people and drop them off in places, which getting high ground in the game is huge. A whole extra dice of attack or defense is very powerful and can make a big difference in your games. So being able to drop people off like that. So then I grabbed some green tone. This was just because I felt that this was just not dark enough. So I threw the green tone on there just to kind of darken up some of the recesses. I probably could have just done another coat of the speed paint as well. So either one would work, just adding another coat. So I decided though that we would go with this. We would go with just putting some green shade on there and see how that turns out. Again, experimenting, which I like the way it turned out. I think it looks pretty good and turned out well using that. Now we take some hardened leather for these little piece of wood on the side. I think it's a good color. Looks like wood. Pretty simple. Getting in between the crack here, between the rocket and the side of this wood is a little difficult. So you may have to do a little touch up after trying to get in that crack. As long as it's dark in there, nobody's gonna be looking that closely probably. Sometimes I think we get a little meticulous, at least I do, and I'm like trying to get some spots. It's like, I don't like, it's almost impossible to see this spot, but I gotta get it. It's kind of a thing for me. It doesn't feel complete. So yeah, that's what we do. I'm trying to find a way to get the paint inside this area. Really difficult, but eventually I find the right angles and I'm able to paint up the sides on the inside of this little spot. And then I figured there needed to be some more wood on here. I didn't want it to all be silver, so I'm gonna make these little things look like wood as well. So we have more than just one wood thing on here. Give it a little bit more contrast. It's nice to kind of switch things up. That's one thing about picking your schemes with paint and everything, what colors are going to be what. You know, it's nice to have some things tie into other things versus just having like one little spot that's a different color, you know, and you don't want it all to be the same because it's kind of boring. So you want to make sure you pick out sections to just be different, and that way things stand out. But also you don't want to make everything so different that they don't mesh well, and then it just kind of like everything's standing out. So typically you want to find something about the miniature that you want to be the focus. Like this is the part that you're going to look at and everybody's gonna be like, wow, look how good that is. And that's where you spend the majority of your time. You know, when you're painting a figure, a lot of times a good place to focus on is like their face and any special features that they have. You know, like with wing creatures, it's good to spend some good time on the wings because that's very notable, you know. Or if there's some really cool weapons that they have. You want to put a little extra time into their weapons so that, you know, that's the focus. So deciding on what you're going to make your focus on the miniature, you can spend more time on that, making it look really good. And then some of the blemishes or the things that you didn't maybe do as well or don't have to spend as much time on won't be noticed. A really fun thing about painting is anybody can do it. I mean, my 6-year-old son has been painting as well, his figures that he's been getting here and there, and he loves it. Makes him really enjoy it, and he's always asking for more figures to paint, so it's a good little hobby to get him into as well. So here we're putting in white on the back of these rockets so that it'll be a lot brighter. So we're going to take yellow, some orange, and some red. So typically, you know, fire is brighter in the center and it kind of works its way out. So we're going to just cover this whole thing in yellow. And then once we get all the yellow on there, we're going to move on to the orange. Looks pretty good. Here we go. Now we grab some of this orange, and I added a bit of water in it. I want to dilute it even more so it's almost glaze-like, so that it goes on very lightly. I didn't want it to just completely cover up our yellow that we put on there. So lightly just kind of glazing in this orange to give it that little bit darker look. And then we take the red and just kind of make circles around it. For whatever reason, I felt like a swirly circle fire made sense. So that's what we're doing. So once you put it all on, then I take my brush and wipe off the brush and come back and wick off some of the paint. So the part that hasn't dried yet is kind of the center, and that kind of gets pulled out. And then the edge kind of that's dried up more stays there. So it gives it kind of this, I don't know, this little swirly, fiery center. And then I grab some white, put some white in the center to brighten it up some more. And after you put the white on there, put a little bit of yellow back over that in the center. So then it just makes it look even brighter. So there we go. What do you think? Some simple flame fire rockets. All right, so now we want to grab some fur color for our guy. And so I switched to like the smallest brush. I think this is like a 0/2 or something. It's pretty small, so that I could get into these really small little areas and paint him up. And I don't know, could be easier to paint him first and then paint around them, because it is really hard to get in there, and I definitely had to do some touch up, nicking some areas, but either way it's doable. So I wanted that purple, so I decided a purple scarf would work, and that can tie into a little bit of that purple on the bottom. Then we grab some black for his gloves, paint up his gloves black, looking pretty good. And there's his other glove getting painted up. And his hard hat, we got to make that black too. And his little shoulder pads are going to be black. So it's pretty simple, not too difficult. And his belt. Yeah, so everything kind of ties in. So I grabbed some more of the polished silver for his musket. That should turn out pretty well. Pretty simple, just pretty much cover the whole thing in silver. Which I'm assuming he'll be able to have a pretty decent attack shooting from his little blimp. And I just grab some brown leather color to do the stock, the hand. And then I grabbed some of that same bronze that's on the ship areas for those details, and thought I'd put on these little straps on his gun to kind of tie that same color scheme in. And then we grab some black just to put it in the center. I know some people drill out those to make it look darker. And now we got to do his eyes. So get some white, and then it's really good to put it on your wet palette and just thin it out a lot. And then just lightly brush in some little eye sections. You might have to do some touch up around it if you make the eyes look a little funny. It happens quite frequently when I'm doing eyes. And then same thing with the black, very, very light. And then you want your eyes to not be in the center of your eyeballs. You actually want them kind of a little closer to each other. Because if you do too close, they're cross-eyed. If you do too far, they just look goofy. And then I do a little line, not a dot, and I think it turns out a little better. And here we want to just give them a little black nose. I think a little black nose makes them look a little more alive. It looks pretty good. And then we're going to take some light blue. This is just regular acrylic paint. And we're going to paint up his entire base blue, which I thought is fitting since he is a airship, so he's flying in the sky, right? So I think that makes a lot of sense. Looking good, all painted up. Now you get yourself some cotton balls and you just take a couple of them and you kind of spread them apart, almost rip them into just random shapes because they will make perfect clouds. Take yourself some basing glue, cover up the base with the glue. I have an old brush that I just keep using for that. Clean it up after, just for doing all my base glue. That way I can spread it around easily. Take your little clouds and just press them into the glue. Probably only need 2 of these guys. Kind of get them in there nice and tight. And there we go. There we have a cloud base. Looks amazing. He is an airship, so he should be flying through the sky most of the time. And lastly, always get yourself some varnish on there to protect your paint job you've done. The varnish will make it so you don't accidentally rub off any of the paint, especially the little edges and corners. It's really good for that. And I like using satin because you get a little bit of a sheen, but it's not too much like gloss. Gloss is really bright. And there we have it. Zed in his giant blimp or airship, whatever you want to call it. Looks amazing. I really enjoyed painting this. It was a lot of fun. Tried a few new things, learned some things along the way. I hope something that in this paint video I've done will inspire you to try new things or play it safe and just do a great paint job. Either way, it was great to paint this. Again, appreciate Renegade and having the opportunity to be here in the Renegade Con and paint up this awesome figure. Heroscape is alive. It is in production. New figures coming out all the time with the story arcs. It's a lot of fun. The community's thriving. Come join us if you haven't and enjoy the Heroscape. I hope you enjoyed this video. Until next time, we'll see you.